So, next instalment of Mr. Gum. We're on chapter 6. Mr. Gum lays down his hearts. Meanwhile, Mr. Gum was a mumbling and a grumbling his way into town. He made his way past Billy William III's Right Royal Meats, and while he was tempted to go in, he knew that it would be a waste of time. He would never find anything nice smelling in Billy William's butcher's shop. That was one of the reasons Mr. Gum liked him, because he was a stinker. There were no customers with Billy William at that hour, and Mr. Gum could see him through the dirty window. He is playing a game of butcher's darts, which is exactly the same as normal darts, except that the board is a pig's head and the darts are old sheep's bones. Billy William had invented it one day when he was drunk. Mr. Gum loved butcher's darts, but there was no time to pop in and challenge Billy William to a match. He had more important fish to fry, or rather, to poison. Or rather, dog, not fish. He had more important dog to poison. So he continued on and crossed over to Mrs. Lovely's wonderful land of sweets, which was a sweet shop at the other end of the road. As you might guess, Mr. Gum didn't enjoy going in there at all because it was a wonderland of sweets and goodness, and Mr. Gum was a filthy old devil who hated good things like sweets and birthday parties and kittens dressed as clowns. He would much rather hear a piano being demolished by illegal bulldozers than a Mozart concerto. He didn't even like pop music, not even the Beatles. The only thing he liked about the Beatles was their name, because they sounded like insects, and you could scare people with insects. So he stepped into the sweet shop as cautiously as a paper hat in a storm. Immediately the air was full of marvellous scents. The powdery smell of sherbet lemons mingled with the odours of strawberry bombs and licorice whips. Mr. Gum felt sick. He felt as if he were being attacked by the forces of good. So when he was a boy, he had loved eating sweets, but that was before he had turned into a bad man. Yet now he seemed to hear the voice of the boy he had once been, calling to him down the years. Where did it go, all the good? Where, oh where? Turn again, turn again. You can be good again, I know it. There is still time. Turn again, Mr. Gum, said the voice in his head. He looked down and saw that the voice was not in his head after all, but belonged to a young boy who was standing next to him. Turn again, Mr. Gum. You can be good again, said the boy, offering him a fruit chew. For some strange reason, the boy's honest face frightened Mr. Gum more than anything else in the sweet shop. All this talk of turning again, he snarled, shoving the boy out the door. I don't like it, I tell you. It makes me feel sick. At that moment, Mrs. Lovely came tumbling out of the back room with her kindly eyes and kindly nose and kindly ears. How can noses and ears be kindly? Wondered Mr. Gum. But it was true. Everything about Mrs. Lovely was kindly. She was even kindly to disgraces like Mr. Gum, and he could not bear this. It made him want to break down inside and cry all the bad things away. Hello, you old witch, he sneered. Give me some lemonade powder. Mrs. Lovely's eyes sparkled. Yes, it is a beautiful day, Mr. Gum. Yes, indeed. She smiled as she measured out a bag of lemonade powder. I don't know what's so lovely about it, you old menace, snarled Mr. Gum, handing over some potatoes he had painted to look like pound coins to save money. He was annoyed to see that as soon as the potatoes touched Mrs. Lovely's hands, they turned into real money. One of them turned into a jewel with a laughing face on it. Shabba me whiskers, he growled, turning on his heel in disgust. A pleasure to see you as always, Mr. Gum, beamed Mrs. Lovely as the old man stormed out of with the little bag of lemonade powder clutched between his elbows. I do hope you come again soon. Mr. Gum hardly noticed the walk home, mainly because he took a taxi. He couldn't wait to get his plan into action. Very soon he was back in his smelly kitchen. He rubbed his hands together gleefully and danced a cruel jig, like a spiteful imp who'd snotted over all the presents on Christmas morning. He opened the little bag and sprinkled its contents over the rotten and poisoned cow hearts. Then he gave them a quick sniff. Jibbers! he gasped, clutching his throat. They smell of lemons and sunshine and friendship. I can hardly breathe. Holding it at arm's length, Mr. Gum took the plate of doom out into his very neat and tidy garden. He placed it right in the middle of the lawn, where Jake was sure to see it. The day was very still. Not a single blade of grass was moving. Somewhere in the distance, a chicken barked. Mr. Gum settled back in his favourite broken chair and waited to see what would happen. Chapter 7, Friday O'Leary. So now we head back to Polly, who is just where we left her, having a good old cry outside the secret cottage. Who, though, is that old man watching her from the window? You've probably been going crazy from all the suspense, haven't you? Well, you can breathe a sigh of relief because it was none other than Friday O'Leary, who is one of the heroes of this story. The next time somebody says to you, I hate old men, all old men are unpleasant and wicked, don't be too quick to agree with them. Take a minute to think about this tale. All old men are unpleasant and wicked? That's nonsense, you will say. No, it's not, says this somebody whose name is Anthony. Mr. Gum's an old man and he's a dreadful old shocker. That's true, Anthony, you say, but what about Billy William III? And what about Billy William III, says Anthony smugly. He's as horrible as Brussels sprouts. Well, you've got me there, you say, but Anthony, you are forgetting about Friday O'Leary. He's an old man too, and he's an absolute winner. Oh, I am so stupid. I forgot about Friday O'Leary, says Anthony. I'm going away now to pay £200 to see a glass of water balanced on a horse's back. That is how stupid I am. And you will never be bothered by the likes of Anthony again. Just who was this O'Leary character anyway? Not a lot was known about him because he was a mysterious sort of fellow. But I will tell you what I know based on rumours, half-truths and downright fibs. Friday O'Leary was as old as the hills and as wise as the hills, but not quite as tall as the hills. His bald head was covered in thick curly hair, and he had the normal number of legs. He was the only person ever to have found a needle in a haystack, although to be fair, it was a very large needle and a tiny haystack. His favourite number was green, and his favourite colour was 26. He sometimes got his numbers and colours mixed up, and he owned the world's smallest collection of stamps. None at all. Oh, and one last thing. Occasionally, for reasons known only to himself, Friday O'Leary shouted, "The truth is a lemon meringue!" at the end of his sentences. Anyway, earlier that day, Friday had been sitting in his front room playing the piano. He was playing a song he had written himself called He Was Playing a Song He Had Written Himself, all about how he was playing a song he had written himself. He had also written a song called But He Wasn't Playing That at the Moment. He had just come to the final lines when the telephone rang. Friday ran to get it, but he was too late because it wasn't ringing in his cottage. It was ringing in Ethel Frumpton's house 100 miles away. It was her friend Mavis on the phone. "Hello, Ethel," said Mavis. "How's things?" Back at the secret cottage, there came the sound of crying and sobbing and general unhappy little girl noises. Friday rushed to the window and uttered those famous suspense-filled words I mentioned before. "Well, well, well," he said. "What have we here? A little girl in trouble." Then he opened the door and stepped outside. "Hello," he said to Polly. "Are you all right? The truth is a lemon meringue!" "Who are you?" asked Polly. She was a little bit nervous because her mother had told her never to talk to strangers. Her mother was full of this sort of advice. Brush your teeth twice a day, wash your hands before meals, don't cut your legs off with a bread knife. But most of all, it was never talk to strangers, which was blooming good advice, especially with a stranger as strange as the stranger before her now. "They call me Mungo Bubbles," said the stranger, "but I don't know why, because my name is Friday O'Leary." And then Polly knew it was all right, because her mother had told her all about this remarkable man one stormy night. This is what her mother had said. "Friday O'Leary is a mysterious old man who lives in a secret cottage near the woods. No one knows exactly where it is, not even the Prime Minister. But if you are in dire need, you may find yourself there, and he will help you with your problems. Friday O'Leary, I mean, not the Prime Minister. Then Polly had a thought. What if it wasn't really Friday O'Leary? What if it was a bad man pretending to be him? She remembered something else her mother had said to her. Friday O'Leary can juggle 5 ping-pong balls and a banana, and he hardly ever drops them. So Polly asked the old man if he would mind juggling 5 ping-pong balls and a banana for her. Luckily, she had 5 ping-pong balls and a banana in her skirt pocket. So Friday juggled them, and he hardly ever dropped them, and then Polly was convinced. Suddenly the woods looked friendly and welcoming, and Polly saw how beautiful all the nature was, and how she probably wasn't going to be eaten by a flower or anything. Friday O'Leary, she cried, I'm well glad to meet you. My name is Jammy Grammy Lammy for Hupper for... I think I'll just call you Polly, said Friday. Chapter 8. Some things happen. Now I'll tell you what. Friday O'Leary wasn't the only character in this story with a mysterious house. Nobody knew where Jake the dog lived either. I bet he lives on a farm and plays with all the other animals, said Jonathan Ripples, the fattest man in town, rubbing his chins. Maybe he lives in the house of a rich man who feeds him bones made of gold, said the little girl called Peter. This is just a guess, said Martin Laundrette, but perhaps he lives on a farm where he plays with all the other animals. Suddenly Jonathan Ripples pounced on Martin Laundrette and sat on him until he was wheezing for breath like a broken accordion. That'll teach you not to steal people's ideas, you skinny rubbisher, said Jonathan Ripples. Come on, Peter, let's go for an ice cream. In any case, Jake didn't live on a farm, and he didn't live in a rich man's house. Nobody knew where he lived, except me. And I'm not telling you. OK, I'll tell you for £1. OK, 50p. OK, 10p. Come on, 10p. It's not much. Oh, go on. Oh, OK, you win. I'll tell you anyway. He lived in the woods, up a horse chestnut tree. He had built a great big nest up there and filled it full of old leaves which kept him warm at night. Someone had left an old radio lying around the woods, and Jake had found it one day and taken it up to his nest, even though it didn't work. He was just a dog after all. While Polly was searching for Jake, that very dog had been having a grand old time. He'd larked around with the cuckoos, gone cuckoo with the larks, and bought some tinfoil off a magpie for a couple of horse chestnuts. After lunch, he decided to go into town to play in a garden or two. He shimmied down the tree quicker than you can read this sentence and set off in a very happy mood. Off he went, strolling along in the sunshine with not a care in the world, barking and burping away and singing a song which went like this. Bark, 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 woof. Soon Jake came to the town. He passed old Granny's garden with its lovely soft lawn and pond full of friendly ducks. He passed the celebrated garden of the retired wrestler, Marvellous Marvin, with its rockery in the shape of wrestling. He passed Beanie McLeany's garden, where everything rhymed and the flowers grew like towers. But there was only one garden Jake fancied romping in today, and that was Mr. Gum's. On he went on his great furry legs. Soon he came to the high street, watching secretly from behind his greasy window. Billy William laughed to think of the nasty surprise that awaited the unsuspecting hound. "It's funty," he chuckled to himself as Jake walked down the road and out of sight. At last, Jake came to the spiky fence that surrounded Mr. Gum's dirty house. It might have kept other dogs out, but Jake was one of those magnificent beasts who know no fear, nor hesitation, nor how to scramble eggs properly. He did a sort of a bouncing run, and in no time at all he was over it. Well, obviously not in no time at all. Of course it took some time, but not much. He landed in the garden in a shower of dirt and flowers and barked his welcoming bark to let all his garden friends know that he had arrived. His welcoming bark went like this. Whoa! as opposed to his normal bark, which went like this. Boo! The animals all recognised Jake's welcoming bark because it was so different from his normal one. Immediately the moles popped up out of their mole holes, the squirrels popped out of their squirrel holes, and the cats popped up out of their cat holes. In Mr. Gum's kitchen, the toast popped up out of the toaster, and Mr. Gum saw it trying to escape and scoffed it up greedily. What's going on? He scowled, but then his eyes lit up horribly. I bet it's him, he exclaimed, spitting toast everywhere. I bet it's that flea-bag dog. Very carefully, Mr. Gum tiptoed over the kitchen window and did secret spying with his unfriendly eyes. Outside, Jake was racing excitedly around the lawn, chasing his own tail. The caterpillars were so happy to see him that they immediately metamorphosed into butterflies. One of the caterpillars was so happy that it metamorphosed into a donkey. The moles squeaked and the butterflies roared with pleasure. The birds came swooping out of the trees, chirping like good uns, and the sun seemed to do magic tricks in the sky. Mr. Gum watched the whole scene unfold from behind the curtains, hating all the joy that the world was having. Come on, you meddler, he said under his bad breath. Come on and eat them hearts. Then it happened. Jake suddenly stopped barking. His nose twitched as he sniffed the scent of lemonade powder. Of course, the townsfolk were always putting out delicious treats for Jake, so he thought that his luck was in. He bounded over to the plate of cow hearts in the middle of the lawn. The other animals froze in horror as the big dog opened his mouth. One of the moles let out a warning squeak, but he only got as far as the squeak. It was too late. Jake's doggy jaws had already closed around a heart. Chew, chew, chew. He chewed it up. Swallow, swallow, swallow. He swallowed it down. Go for another, go for another, go for another. He went for another heart. But before he could take another bite, he gave a sad woof and fell over on his side, his big furry belly moving rapidly in and out. Suddenly, the sun was covered up by a dirty grey cloud the size of Sweden. Behind the curtains, Mr. Gum was laughing like a robber. Tune in next time to see what's happened to Jake. Stay safe.